Welcome to a video on measuring length in the metric system. And what we're going to be doing is using dimensional analysis to change units of measurements. Things like inches to feet, feet to yards, feet to meters, yards to meters, things like that. The metric prefixes, converting units within the metric system, and then using dimensional analysis, again, these fractions that we use to change from and to the metric system from our customary US system. Okay, in length, the units of measure that we typically use here in the good old US of A is inches, feet, yards, miles, and they have some very bizarre numbers involved. 3, 12, 36, 5,280, just bizarre, far out there numbers. Unlike the metric system, which uses 10 and 10 and 10 and 10 and 10 to do their conversions. These down here are fractions. They're called unit fractions. The reason why they're called that is they have a value of 1. 12 inches is a foot, and when you divide something by the same thing, you get 1. So 12 inches divided by 1 foot is 1. 1 foot divided by 12 inches is 1. 5,280 feet divided by a mile is 1. And what we're going to end up doing with these is multiplying a measurement by these fractions equivalent to 1, and what that ends up doing is it doesn't change the actual measurement, it just changes the units. So it allows us to go from feet to inches, or yards to miles, or feet to miles. So what we do is we convert a measurement to a different unit. We multiply by these unit fractions here, and the given unit of measurement will appear in the denominator of the unit fraction. So if we're starting with inches and going to feet, we would pick this one rather than this one, because we want the inches from the denominator to cancel with the inches from the actual measurement. Okay, it works just like numbers do. If we had like 12, let's do feet, and we wanted to change that to inches, I would multiply by the one that has 12 inches is a foot. And the reason why I'm doing that is because these feet right here and these feet right here cancel, and it leaves me with 12 times 12 is 144 inches. Alright, that is what the purpose of having the two different unit fractions is, because sometimes we're going to go from feet to inches, but sometimes we'll go in reverse from inches to feet. And in that case, then I would want the one that has inches on the bottom, rather than the one in this case that had feet on the bottom. So that's why we have different versions of these things, just to be able to have the unit we want to get rid of in the denominator in all the different possible scenarios. Alright, so here's an example. We want to convert, let me pull this down, I don't know why it's out of the screen like that. We want to convert 40 inches to feet. So we're starting off with inches, we're going to feet. So that means when we set up our fraction, we want the one that has inches in the denominator rather than inches in the numerator, so the inches will cancel. Alright, and then we're left with 40 over 40 times 1 over 1. 1 times 12, and that means we divide. So 40 divided by 12, 33 1/3, or 33.3 repeating. Alright, and then if we wanted to do feet to miles, we want the one that has feet on the bottom, miles on the top, because we want feet to cancel. Alright, this is optional to put this 1 in the denominator, but if it helps you see who's numerator and denominator, then do it. Alright, you always want your original unit that you're given to be offset with the unit fraction you pick, so your units will cancel. Okay, so this creates division again. Sometimes you'll create multiplication like we did on this one, and then sometimes it'll create division like we see in both of these. So with dimensional analysis, with changing units of measure, you're always going to multiply or divide, but setting up the unit fractions removes the confusion, or it makes it to where you don't have to do any guesswork. You just see, if there's a number in the denominator, then you're going to divide. If there is a 1 down in the denominator, then you're going to multiply to get these numbers. Alright, the metric system. In the metric system, everything is about tens. we have these prefixes, kilo, hecto, deca, deci, centa, and milli. There's others, but these are the ones that we see the most because they are the ones that are the closest to the base unit. Now, base units, in the metric system, it's meters for length, but then if we're measuring something else like volume, it would be liters instead of meters. If we're measuring mass, it would be grams. But the prefixes don't change. Like we have kilograms, kilometers or kilometers, centimeters, milliliters. We have these same prefixes with all the different base units in the metric system, just depending on what it is we're measuring. Again, it's not, that's not the way that we're used to it. We're used to things like feet, yards, and inches for length. And then when we switch to volume, we get into gallons and quarts and pints. And then if we're going to measure weight, we use pounds and ounces. We have different names all the way across the board. We also have different numbers that go with those. So the metric system will always use these same prefixes, and they always mean the same thing. Deca means 10 times the base unit, so decaliters is 10 liters. All right, centa, liters, or centa in this case meters for when we're going to start with length. Centimeters would be 1/100th of a meter. There's 100 centimeters in the meter. So anyway, there's the meaning of those. There's the prefixes. There's the symbols that we put in front of them. So what we're going to do in this section is we're going to put meters are our base unit. So we'll put kilometers, hectometers, decameters, decimeters, centimeters, and millimeters. And that's what we mean by the prefix is symbol when we're making the symbols of these things. And then the next section, or the sections to come, we'll switch to things like liters, and then it'll be kiloliters, deciliters, liters, deciliters, deciliters, centiliters, and milliliters. Some of them are more common than others, like milliliters and liters and kiloliters. But again, that's all we do is we just change the base unit and the symbol for the base unit, but the prefixes and the symbols for the prefixes never change. Alright, so there it is for the meters, the symbols, the actual units that we're talking about, and how they compare to the base unit of meter. So 10, we just go up the 3 most common, above the 3, below, and then just notice it's just multiply by 10, multiply by 10, multiply by 10, divide by 10, divide by 10, divide by 10. We're going from one to the other. Alright, so when we change units in the metric system, it simply becomes swinging a decimal point. So when we go from larger to smaller units, it's in multiplying by 10, but remember that just means moving decimal points to the right, and going from smaller to larger units involves dividing by 10, which means we move decimal points to the left. And if you remember writing this thing in order like this, then that just becomes moving, because there's 10, it's always based on 10, it literally just moves the decimal point because our number system is based on 10. Alright, let's try one. Convert 504.7 meters to kilometers. Well, we write them all in this order. K, H, D, A, the base unit, D, C, M. And we're going from meters to kilometers. So that's 1, 2, 3 to the left. So that literally means we take that decimal point and we move it 1, 2, 3 to the left, and we end up with 0.5047 kilometers. Right, this is called the swing method. This is the little the way you have to write it. You have to write it from left to right, getting from biggest to smallest for it to work. But it's kind of like place value. It's like thousands place, hundreds place, tens place, ones place, tenths place, hundredths place, thousandths place. It's very similar to place value, but you're just changing units. So you just swing it. If you get it reversed, if you go from smallest to largest, then you're going to go the wrong way. You would move that thing 3 places in the wrong direction. So do make sure that you go from largest units to smallest units. If you go to a Google search box, you can start Googling King Henry died, and then this phrase comes up: King Henry died drinking chocolate milk. That phrase, King Henry died drinking chocolate milk, is a little mnemonic used to help you remember this order. So King Henry died, and then you skip over drinking chocolate milk. It just helps you remember the prefixes. I actually say, instead of what Google says, I actually say by, like how he died. So King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk, and that by stands for the base unit. So that you have an abbreviation for everything, and you have everything included. So King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk, kilometers, hectometers, decameters, meters, decimeters, centimeters, millimeters. So that's what that's used for. Feel free to use it if you want to. Come up with another mnemonic if you want to, but it just makes it easier than have to look it up every single time when you are having to convert measurements in the metric system. Alright, but that's the swing method. The swing method is by far the easiest way to convert within the metric system. Alright, 27 meters to centimeters. We're starting from meters, we're moving to the right to centimeters. So there's not a decimal point in the number, that means it's a whole number. So put a decimal point at the end, the right end of it. So basically right here I would put a decimal point, and then that decimal point gets moved 2 places to the right. So that would go from 27 to 270 to 2,700 by moving it 2 to the right. So again, if there's not one there, you're just putting it in there and swinging over 2 places to the right. Now, the big thing, the hardest thing to do, because you probably have converted inches to feet and feet to yards and feet to miles and all that stuff before, and you may have seen the swing method for the metric system. But the hardest thing to do is typically switching from our system to the metric system and reverse. So this is what we use in that case. We have an inch, 254 centimeters, a foot is 30.48 centimeters, a yard is about 9/10 of a meter, and a mile is about 1.6 kilometers. But when we use those, we can create those same unit fractions that we saw before. Because these things are equal, we can do something like 1 inch and 2.54 centimeters. Because they're equal, they're the same thing, we can create these unit fractions that if I want to go from centimeters to inches, I can multiply by this number, or vice versa. And then I can set up 2 for each one with this on top, this on the bottom, this on top, this on the bottom, and then reverse them. And you create all these different unit fractions that allows us to go from the accustomed units that we're accustomed to, the English system, and switch it to the metric system, and then vice versa. Alright, suppose I want to go convert 125 miles to kilometers. I'm getting ready to go to, or maybe I'm in Canada or somewhere, and I need to figure out what the metric equivalent was. So I'm going to use this version, miles on the bottom and kilometers on the top, because this is the measurement I have, and I mean I want miles and down in the denominator. So I'm just using this down here, putting miles in the denominator and kilometers on the top, and multiplying by that 125. The units cancel, miles cancels with miles, and I'm only left with the only measurement I have left or the only units I have left are kilometers. The denominator is all ones, so that means I'm not dividing, I'm just multiplying. So I multiply and I get 200 kilometers. Alright, and then what if I want to convert 26,800 millimeters to inches? Well, first notice that there is no conversion from millimeters to inches. I don't have an equality there. I don't have an equation relating the two. So what I have to do is I have to get my way back into the US system by going from millimeters to centimeters. So how do I do that? Remember, we use that King Henry died thing. And don't pay attention to this. This is just copied from the other one. So this is not what we're doing here. We're going from millimeters. We're going from here to centimeters. So that means we need to go back to the left one. So there's my decimal point. I need to go back to the left one. So that means I have 2,680 centimeters. Okay, so once I've got myself in the door with centimeters, now I can go to inches because I have the correct unit of measure from the table. So now I'm going to start with that 2,680, and I'm going to use this fraction because it's got centimeters down in the bottom, which will cancel and get me to inches. So I'm going to end up with 2,680 on the top. I do have a number on the bottom, so that means I divide. So I divide that, I get a decimal. So I approximate or round it to about 1,055 inches. Alright, that is converting from metric system to the US system and vice versa. It is not a pretty process because it's two completely different units of measure. But until the United States, switches over our system of measurement from the inches and feet and miles to meters and kilometers and centimeters and millimeters, it's just something that we'll have to be able to do.